This video was brought to you by GiveWell. Ever since Israel began its invasion of Gaza in October, one of the big questions has been whether or not the war would spill out into a wider regional conflict. Now, the most likely vector for escalation here is probably Hezbollah, an anti-Israel militant group backed by Iran that mostly operates in southern Lebanon. Originally, it looked like a significant escalation here had been avoided. While the IDF and Hezbollah had been trading missile strikes around the Israel-Lebanon border for the past few months, this isn't exactly unusual, and in his public speeches, Hezbollah's leader had conspicuously avoided committing to more serious support for Hamas. However, in the past few weeks, Israel's rhetoric has become increasingly bellicose, and on Sunday, Israel's national security advisor told Israeli broadcaster Channel 12 that Israel, quote, could no longer accept Hezbollah forces sitting on the border, before Israel launched a series of massive missile strikes in southern Lebanon. So in this video, we're going to take a look at Israel's ongoing invasion of Gaza, why an Israel-Lebanon war now looks more likely than before, and why this will be pretty terrible for everyone involved. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. So, the first thing we should say is we've done a whole load of videos on Hezbollah before, so if you want to know more about the group and their origins, then you should go and watch those. But the TLDR is that Hezbollah is a militant group created by a handful of pro-Iranian Shia clerics in southern Lebanon in the 1980s, when southern Lebanon was actually occupied by Israel. With Iranian backing, they quickly established themselves as the most effective militia in Lebanon, and fought a sustained guerrilla campaign against the IDF until Israel's withdrawal in 2000. After the withdrawal, Hezbollah took control of southern Lebanon, and became an important player in wider Lebanese politics. Now, both because they fought an insurgency campaign against Israel, and because they're backed by Israel's arch-nemesis Iran, Hezbollah's relations with Israel have always been tense, and cross-border missile strikes aren't uncommon. And in 2006, cross-border attacks escalated into an Israeli invasion of southern Lebanon. But this didn't go all that well for the IDF, who were forced to withdraw after a month-long guerrilla warfare campaign by Hezbollah. After the 2006 war, the UN passed a resolution that essentially tried to create a demilitarized buffer zone between the Litani River and the Blue Zone, which is sort of a de facto border between Israel and Hezbollah. However, this didn't really work, both because Hezbollah refused to fully withdraw, and because Israeli troops continue to occupy bits of the contested territory north of the Blue Line. Anyway, unsurprisingly, when Israel began its invasion of Gaza, all eyes turned to Hezbollah to see how they'd respond. But while there was an uptick in cross-border missile strikes, Hezbollah basically signaled that they didn't want a full-on war with Israel. Hezbollah officials made clear that they had nothing to do with the October 7th attacks, and, unlike the Iran-aligned Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah's leader refrained from declaring war on Israel. Somewhat unsurprisingly, given that Hezbollah is essentially an Iranian proxy, Iran took a similar position to Hezbollah, insisting that they had no foreknowledge of the October 7th attacks, and refraining from active escalation against Israel. So why didn't Hezbollah and Iran react more aggressively? Well, as we see it, there are broadly two reasons. And the first is the US. Almost immediately after the October 7th attacks, the US sent 2 aircraft carriers into the eastern Mediterranean, making it clear that they would intervene on Israel's behalf if Iran got involved, via Hezbollah or otherwise. And it seems that this has deterred them. But the second reason is that Israel is already doing immense damage to its international reputation. Whether you think that the Israeli response is justified or not, it's undeniable that Israel's massive assault on Gaza and the accompanying humanitarian catastrophe has made Israel deeply unpopular amongst the international community. UN General Assembly resolutions calling for Israel to end the war are backed by an overwhelming majority of UN members. And it was a lone veto by the US that prevented the Security Council from passing a ceasefire resolution on Friday, which was sponsored by over 100 other UN members. Now, Iran probably realized that its involvement might actually help Israel diplomatically, because Western countries are more likely to condemn Israel's invasion of Gaza if it looks like a genocide against Palestine rather than an Iran-Israel proxy war. However, even if Hezbollah didn't want to get involved in the war, recent comments from Israeli officials suggest that they might not actually get any choice in the matter. Last month, Israel's foreign minister warned that there was a risk of war if Hezbollah didn't withdraw from southern Lebanon. And on Friday, Netanyahu warned that Israel would turn Beirut and southern Lebanon into Gaza after an Israeli civilian was killed by Hezbollah. Perhaps the most explicit threat came from Israel's national security advisor on Saturday, when he said that Israel would no longer accept Hezbollah's presence in northern Israel, and that, unless Hezbollah agrees to change its situation diplomatically, which looks unlikely if not impossible, Israel will have to act. A day later, Israel launched a series of massive airstrikes into southern Lebanon and Syria, which Hezbollah described as a new escalation. While it's worth noting that Israel's national security advisor also said that Israel didn't want a two-front war, and that the war in Gaza was likely to last months, he nonetheless argued that the 80,000 or so Israelis that had been evacuated from northern Israel would be unable to return until Hezbollah were expelled. And, even if it's not imminent, war between Israel and Hezbollah now feels significantly more likely. So, why is Israel apparently intent on war with Hezbollah? Well, it's in part because Israel is understandably anxious about its national security in the aftermath of the October 7th attacks, and because direct Iranian involvement now looks less likely given the dovishness of their immediate response. However, it's also because Israel is no longer really receptive to international pressure. Despite the fact that the vast majority of the international community is pushing Israel to de-escalate, Gaza has taught Netanyahu and co. that they can basically ignore international opinion, especially if the US is willing to protect them both militarily and at the UN. A year or so ago, when Israel was trying to normalize relations with its Arab neighbors, it would have been wary of even threatening to attack Lebanon, for fear of its impact to its diplomatic standing. Today, though, it looks like Israel has pretty much given up on keeping up appearances with the international community, and Netanyahu's government is accordingly more willing to break international norms and do stuff like threatening to attack Lebanon. There are over 1.5 million non-profit organizations in the US, and millions more around the world. So how do you know which ones are going to make the biggest impact with your donation? Well, GiveWell was founded to help donors with that exact question. They spend tens of thousands of hours poring over independent studies and charity data to help donors direct their funds to evidence-based organizations that are saving and improving lives. In fact, GiveWell has now spent over 15 years researching charitable organizations and only directs funding towards a few of the highest impact opportunities they've found. That's things like bed nets for as little as $5, which can reduce the number of malaria infections in impacted regions, which with enough nets can lead to a significant drop in infections and thus boost life expectancy. Together, over 100,000 donors have used GiveWell to donate over $1 billion, and rigorous evidence suggests that these donations will save over 150,000 lives and improve the lives of millions more. In fact, in 2019, when we sold TLDR-branded pin badges for charity, we turned to GiveWell to help select the charities that we donated to, ensuring the maximum impact of our giving. And GiveWell wants as many donors as possible to make informed decisions about high-impact giving. As such, you can find their research and recommendations on their website for free. You can also make tax-deductible donations to recommended funds or charities, and GiveWell doesn't take a cut. Plus, if you've never donated to GiveWell's recommended charities before, you can have your donation matched up to $100 before the end of the year, or as long as the matching fund lasts. To claim your match, go to givewell.org, pick YouTube, and enter TLDR News at checkout. And do make sure that they know that you heard about GiveWell from TLDR to get your donation matched. Again, that's givewell.org to donate and find out more.